Historic Macron Lee Summit in Seoul, South Korea. France, Seoul, South Korea. South Korea. France, South Korea. Forge new global. France, I do not recognize the country of France. I do not recognize the country of South Korea. I do not recognize South Korea as a country. It is a divided country. Korea, North Korea, South Korea. I knew men in my hometown, Abingdon, Illinois, who survived the war in South Korea. As of this day, by treaty obligation, the armed forces of a country that is headed by the president, John Donald Trump, has obligations that so state that if hostilities break out in the demilitarized zone, which divides Korea between South and North, that the president would be obligated to, we'll say the president of America, would be obligated to intervene as mandated by a resolution of the United Nations. Since that is the divided, since I have to say the President of America, all treaty obligations between United States, country, and any other country, period, bilateral agreements, trilateral agreements, treaties, trade agreements, or anything such that, in my professional jurisprudential opinion, because I have a doctorate jurisprudential, that the President of America, he's President of America. America is not on any treaties, so there are no obligations. I hereby simply state that all treaty obligations are now hereby and forever revoked, and all such treaties are hereby dissolved. Any agreement that is multilateral is hereby dissolved. Any bilateral treaty is hereby dissolved. Only except that if the President of America, John Donald Trump, in his exclusive opinion and by his desire, should he affix a signature onto a document and there be some agreement subsequent to there, then there are no agreements. I recognize one and only one bilateral agreement, a treaty dated the 24th day of December, 1814, known as the Treaty of Ghent, between His Britannic Majesty, King George of England III, as being a valid treaty, which establishes bilateral relationships between the United States of America and George, King of England, third such name's king, and the realms of King George of England, that began with that treaty and continue uninterrupted according to the terms of the Treaty of Ghent. The President of America, I would suggest, open the treaty and immediately pursue diplomatic relations with the committees and establish them such, and according to the terms of the Treaty of Ghent. It's convenient. If you look at the United States Code, which is published, anybody who has a set of United States Code will find in there the Treaty of Ghent. It was brought back. It was debated by the United States Senate at the time. It was passed unanimously, and then the Senate sought about the process of doing something with the House, and then which they had to do, and that treaty was then codified in the United States Code, which when that did, it becomes the law as codified, which just simply says that that is the terms of the treaty. It didn't convert the treaty to a law. The treaty is the controlling document. It just put it in a form that any person who has access to U.S. code can simply read it in the U.S. code. There cannot be any amendments to that U.S. code because it's based on a treaty. You can't have a treaty through the Senate and through the House to have it codified because it has to be codified so it can be printed. Where do you print a treaty like that? You print in the U.S. code. Subsequent to that, neither the House nor the Senate can then amend that U.S. code because you can't amend a treaty because it's based on a treaty in the first place, and you can't do that. That's the kind of double-dipping nightmare lying mess that the United States Congress would do. So here we are back to this. Let's do this again. The United States of America, the President of America, John Donald Trump, cannot negotiate with or be into diplomatic relations with or enter into any conversation whatsoever with France because we are no longer the United States. We are America now. So that's impossible. I don't have to speak about our relationships with France because we're not a country. We're America. We have a representative, the President of America. Korea, forget about that. Korea is not a country. It is Korea. It's a divided country with demilitarized zone. The President of the United States, the President of America, he can't even talk to Lee, or he cannot. Not in this context. Not with Lee. Here's Mr. Lee with the President of France. Now, what with the wife of the President of France? So what does the President of France think he's going to do with Mr. Lee? Here's the President of France and a man named Mr. Lee. What is the President of France and Mr. Lee going to do? Do what? Forge new global order. New global order. There was a place in America called New France. It started in Louisiana. It was called the Louisiana Purchase. We paid money for that. Thomas Jefferson did that. So France was bought out. It was called New France. He can't have New Global. He can't have New France. No, because Napoleon Bonaparte sold us that to raise money so he could war in Europe. And we financed his efforts to help conquer what he was doing in Europe. We were paid for it. That's gone. It's not. It was New France. Okay, it was New France. Well, there was a place called New Spain, just so you know, and that was all in Mexico. That's done and over with. So this New France, New Spain is not something I'm picking on New France. No, we don't have a problem with Spain. España. No, just making a point. So they're having a summit. A summit. Well, how can the President of France meet with Mr. Lee and call that a summit? Is it because Brigitte, his wife? So it's a summit between what? A husband and a wife and a man named Lee. A husband and a wife and a man named Lee. Now, if that's a summit, then, well, hell, why don't you just come over to my house, a husband, and why don't you just come over to my place, a husband, a wife, a man named Lee? Well, I'm Ronnie-Dean-Ward. Well, come on over. If that's a summit, well, why don't we have a state dinner and pretend like we're in fucking Buckingham Palace then, and Queen Elizabeth is here, or George III. Fantasyland. Where are you going to put an end to Emmanuel Macron? You need to get rid of him. He doesn't belong. If Emmanuel Macron is in the United States, anywhere, America, anywhere, if he's anywhere over here, he's Emmanuel. That's Brigitte, and here's Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, Mr. Macron, and Mrs. Macron. Mr. and Mrs. Macron and Mr. Lee are simply fugitives of justice. enemies to the United States, enemies to the America, enemies to any place that they are given safe harbor, which if they're located at the United Nations, well, Mr. Macron and his wife, Mr. and Mrs. Macron and Mr. Lee can't be guests of the United Nations. How is that possible? Mr. Lee? Why are they together? I would say Secretary General Antonio Gutierrez. Hey, this is your friend, Ronnie-Dean-Ward. You know who I am. I appreciated your message of 3 minutes yesterday. Please do not permit Mr. and Mrs. Macron and Mr. Lee of Korea to give safe harbor inside the United Nations that's sitting in Manhattan. Because if you do that, you're going to put the United Nations back in jeopardy again. So please don't play a game, Mr. Portuguese. They can't have safe harbor. The United Nations buildings are not meant to be safe harbors for private individuals. It's only supposed to be about the business of the charter. I think you get my message, Mr. Secretary General. Mr. Secretary General, there's great opportunity for you. There's a position you can take that I can inform you of about peace in the world, but I have to meet with you. I live in Brooklyn. My information is here. So let's see what they're doing. Okay. Here we go. It's 8 minutes and 56 seconds. I'm going to tell you something right now. You see that flag?
I really didn't know what to expect when
Do you see these flags? I do not. This flag is only meaningful to nowhere. Mr. Macron is not in France. Mr. Lee is not in France. Wherever they're at, they're not in France. They're not in Korea. They're not in Korea. They're in